This is Duty, Virtue, and Filial Love by Sungwoo in the Philosophy Journal. You're free to ask questions or continue as we go. I don't mind, like, talking about stuff. But, like, yeah. Having the access to the university network probably isn't enough for the philosophy papers, unfortunately. But like I said, yeah, we're going to read the paper or go over it. First time I've ever reading it, so I don't know. Based on the abstract, it's Confucius over Kant. I assumed, I didn't even get that far. I'm just assuming when they were doing filial piety, that's where we were going. But I don't know. Because that's usually what people are talking about. So yeah, this is, as always, feel free to ask questions along the way about whatever. If it's off topic, I may ignore you. I don't care. But I'll probably at least mention it. And at the end, if you're still here, we do a little review, and we have a little review, and that'll get recorded for posterity, and it'll go up on the web. And I need to get that done. Hopefully, I'll maybe get something done in the next few weeks while I'm on break. Oh yeah, anyone who doesn't know, I'm gonna be taking vacation starting this Wednesday, and I'll be gone for like 2 full weeks, or maybe like basically 2 weeks in a day. So I'm gonna be gone for a few weeks during August, like till basically late August. I'll be back. So. Like, bye everybody, but I'll be back on Sunday, but then after that, I'll be gone for a few weeks. So, yeah. I guess I'll still be available on Discord if you want to chat. Looks like he has a lot of articles online. Well, good. I mean, I like people who post their stuff online. Yeah. Thanks, Curtin. Hi. Yeah. I mean, do you actually want people to read your papers? Do you? Or do you just care about getting published and then like having your group of friends you email it to like read your papers? Maybe you should actually post more stuff online. And that's why the Phil Paper site is great, because it makes it pretty easy to do that. But people don't do it because, you know, there's not you're only really getting any benefit from the academia when you're an academic. They don't care about anything else. And so it's not great. Yeah, all about the clout. Exactly. So, here we go. Many, if not most, contemporary Western philosophers who work on filial piety have attempted to understand it in terms of duties, or obligations, or responsibilities. Yeah, so as I guess Valpo knows already, we're going deontological Kantian, and then we're going to, maybe this author already wants to push back on that. That is, their attempts have focused on explicating the nature and ground of filial duties we have in relation to our parents. Alright, so everyone with daddy issues, here's raise your hand. On the other hand, some inner attitudes, such as love for one's parents, henceforth filial love, are an important part of being a filial child. It seems hard to do justice to the normative significance of such inner attitudes if we understand them as an object of duty. The aim of this paper is to argue that the normative significance of the inner aspects of filial piety, in particular filial love, is better captured when we understand it as part of the virtue of filial piety rather than an object of duty. I know, if we say virtue enough, does like Aristotle get like called out a lurk if he's here? And I don't know if he's here. I don't look at lurkers, but I wonder if he's going to show up. After briefly introducing the value of filial love, I argue that the idea of a duty to love one's loving parents faces serious difficulties in making sense of the normative significance of filial love. Then I show why the virtue ethical approach... Yep. There we are. Object of duty? Yeah. Well, now we're talking about Aristotle. Okay, virtue, yeah. Enough virtue ethics talk, and Aristotle rears his head. Let's give Aris a shout out. Although I really should be, we've got like all the people in chat. I could be using my, so this is the, if anyone here is not following our buddy Aris, go do that. I mean, this is the, philosophy friends here. Yeah. These are all the peoples. Say Aristotle's name in the mirror 3 times. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if you're lurking. I don't look at that, even though like you can like look in chat stuff, who's there, but I don't know. I know your lurking habits too well. I just assumed if like I start talking about virtue ethics, he's gonna pop up. But anyway, go give Aris a follow. He's our good buddy, and he has talked to him about ethics and ancient philosophy. But like his chats are wild. He has a lot of fun there, and you can talk about all the things you might want to know. But like, yeah, there's also a bunch of other people. I put the link in chat. There's Agni, who's Evolve Yourself TV. He does a lot of meditation on his stream, but you can ask him because he's got a master's in philosophy. He talked about mind, metaphysics, or science. He's a chess tutor also, so you can talk. You see chess there. There's the Ask a Philosopher group who stream irregularly, but that's cool. And Ivan Neal, who's in chat also. Then we got Ann Fernal, who does sociology and politics. Shane McGinnis, who does history and sociology. And new buddy, Kali Oxenfree, who's a linguist. She's also going to be off a lot in August. But yeah, she's for all you technical people out there, if you want to go talk linguistics, she's a linguistics streamer. And so, like, you can talk linguistics and language with her, which is interesting. And Lumpy Dragon Potato streams Minecraft, but he's a chemist, and so you can talk science there. And he does, like, politics and personal finance. Exactly, Vipers. Yeah. Okay. So, we've got something called normative significance here and filial love. So, this is going to be the crux of the argument. Then I show why the virtue ethical approach to filial love, which views it as a constitutive part of filial piety understood as virtue, can do justice to the normative significance while avoiding the difficulties. Okay, so, I mean, right off the bat, we've got obligations or duties versus virtues on the other hand. And, you know, these are nice abstract things, and they're going to define it the way they want to, and it's going to make all the sense in the world because they defined everything they want to. This is my little rant about, like, getting people at the start. I can guarantee you they're going to be defining virtue in the way that works out for them, and they're not going to define obligations, duties, or responsibilities in the way that does not work out for them. But here we go. So, the value of filial love. There's little doubt in the claim that a certain kind of outer behaviors, for example, taking care of one's parents when they are old and infirm, visiting them frequently and offering financial support if necessary, are important components of filial piety. However, having appropriate inner attitudes, that is, emotional and motivational states, towards one's parents also seem to be an important component of filial piety. Yeah, so if you are, you're doing all that stuff, but you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you're not really being pious. Anne says, "Ugh, I hate both my siblings. My virtue is that I kicked them out of my life." And that's probably the healthiest thing you could have done. So it's like, it's annoying. I thankfully get along with my family, but, you know, a lot of people I know do not. And it's just the way things are. You gotta, you know, move on sometimes. Although people may disagree over the specific contents of appropriate filial inner attitudes, I believe it can be largely agreed that filial piety involves more than outer behaviors. Yeah. So, exactly. You kind of have to, like, you can do stuff. I was just watching what's it called, Monsters Ball, with what's the guy's name, Billy Bob Thornton, and I don't know if I'm going to spoil this for anyone, but he has a dad in that movie. And Billy Bob and his dad get along for most of the movie, but at a certain point, spoiler, he puts his dad in a nursing home. His dad's getting older, and he puts his dad in his nursing home. And the lady doing the paperwork and stuff says, "Oh, like he must got him like the premium package or whatever." And the lady goes, "Oh, you must really love your dad." And Billy Bob looks back and goes, "No, I don't, but he's my dad, so there it is." It's like he was doing it out of obligation, but not out of love. And so you can see right there in that scene what this author is talking about, if you've seen the movie. It's a good movie. I think Halle Berry won like the best supporting actor for that. Okay, it seems reasonable to think that being filial constitutively involves having appropriate inner attitudes as well as appropriate outer behaviors. Then what would the candidate for such filial inner attitudes? As P.J. Ivanhoe claims, plausible candidates as the true basis of filial piety include the sense of gratitude, reverence, and love that children naturally feel when they are nurtured, supported, and cared for by people who do so out of loving concern for the child's well-being. The institution that love for one's parents is required for being filial is also supported by the proponents of friendship theory, among others. According to them, just like friends are motivated to love rather than by the prospect of repayment, so does a filial child would be motivated by love for helping and benefiting her parents. All right, so now we've really got Aristotle's attention because we've got friend theory here too. Friendship theory. Yeah, the love desirable for a filial child would be a special kind of love that is distinguished from impartial benevolence. Unreal says it's a thing in the Asian tradition, but to me, filial piety is too narrow. You take care of the people you love, however appropriate. It's that simple. Yeah, I mean, there's big things on family in lots of cultures, but like nowadays, I think we're getting to this more expanded thing. Also, what Leanne was saying, you have to pick and choose who your family is. And so you pick and choose, and so you take care of like your friends too. Like you take care of all of the people as much as you can. So it's like you can't take care of all your family, and you can't take care, and you do take care of other people that aren't traditionally family. But that's, I think, the contemporary way forward. It's like you have to pick and choose your family sometimes, as much as and pet family. Exactly, you're picking and choosing your family because things have gotten stupid, and so it's like it's kind of, you don't need to rely on the old way of thinking about who is family anymore. It doesn't always work out according to like the traditional ways we've thought about this. As Keller says, a filial child would do things for the parent willingly out of love, not out of motive of duty. It would be reasonable to suppose, and I shall assume here for the sake of argument, that filial inner attitudes include at least love for one's parents, broadly construed as involving special care and attachment. It's not to deny that the virtue of filial piety may involve other important inner attitudes, such as gratitude and respect. Okay. Yeah, so again, this is already set up, like you can see. You have to have some sort of inner motivation. Now, why isn't that a duty? And now we're going to go filial love and duty. If the author is right, filial love is one of important inner attitudes that are constitutive of filial piety. Being filial involves not just performing filial actions, motivated by such filial emotional attitude as love, but also having those emotions toward the parents considered independently of their motivational role. Other things being equal, a person who performs filial actions motivated by love for her parents would be more filial, that is, more virtuous as their child in some respect, than one who does the same from a sense of duty, and a person who has filial love would be more filial than one who lacks it. Okay, so are you a better child for loving your parents? That's what they just said. Like, really? Because what if your parents are terrible? Like, this is assuming maybe that your parents are worthy of love. You might be a better parent, but like I said, in Billy Bob, in the movie, he doesn't really like his dad, but he's doing the thing out of duty, and that was good, but his dad is maybe not someone to like. The dad's racist, like, horribly racist in that movie, and he's kind of an asshole. So it's like, not just hating on black people, but he's an asshole. So it's like, maybe doing the right thing in spite of not having the love is more important sometimes. So I'm not 100% sure that a person who have filial love would be more filial than one who lacks it. Well, in the case of Billy Bob in Monsters Ball, the son is doing the right thing even though he kind of hates his dad at that time. So that would be someone who is very filial. It's different, maybe of a different type. Okay. Love for one's parents has special normative significance, at least insofar as the parents have loved one and one has accepted and encouraged it in some sense. Yeah, again, you have to say that the parents weren't schmucks. Like, the parents have loved their kid. It's arguable that, like in Monsters Ball, the dad was kind of a schmuck. Of course, if the parents have been consistently unloving, okay, here we go. For example, abusive, cruel, or indifferent, it seems to generate a good excuse for the child not to love them, no matter how great or good filial love is for the parents. Socrates has entered the chat, but what is piety? Well, in this case, I mean, yeah, who knows? Dude, just go Darth Vader. I mean, Billy Bob, seriously? Well, look, I saw Monsters Ball more recently than I saw Star Wars. And in the case of Darth Vader, spoiler, he's Luke's father. Sorry about that. It wasn't up to Luke to throw Darth Vader into a nursing home. Instead, he threw the Emperor into a pit and saved his dad. So I don't actually think that works out, although it's a good comment, Vipers. But like, it doesn't actually work for the example I need. I am your father. Can you give me a hand here? Dude, you just took the hand. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay, so they're conditionalizing this now on actually having non-shit parents. No. Yeah, thank you, Valpo. You disagree but move on? Well, tell me why. I'd like to know actually, because look, if what did Luke do to love his to show piety to his father? Was it the "I still believe in you, Dad, even though you've been doing terrible things" sort of thing? I mean, his dad just wasn't there. That was the whole point of Star Wars. That like he showed love to his father, even though his dad was killing everybody. Yeah, man, maybe you're right. I have not really focused on the parent-child relationship in Star Wars. But again, like I said, Billy Bob does not like his father, and he's doing the right thing by him. When did Luke do the right thing by his father? Believe in him? Like, Billy Bob does not believe in his father at the end of that movie. And that's kind of my point here. He doesn't like him, and he doesn't think he's really redeemable. Luke thought his father was redeemable. And so that's kind of... And it's like, shut up, nerds. Yeah, oh well. But like, that's the whole point. Did Billy Bob's father cut off his son's head? Well, he almost lost him his, like, girlfriend. And that really pissed off Billy Bob. Like, if you, like, lose your son, Halle Berry, as a girlfriend, wouldn't you take that as an insult? Yeah, Aracel says conditionalizing it makes it more palatable, but also, as far as I understand, A, makes it less traditional Confucian, could be wrong about that, and B, makes filial piety fall under some bigger, higher priority ethical value. That's fine, but it weakens the role of filial piety. Yeah, that's right. And so this paper might be a grapes paper that kind of shrivels up. They claimed piety at the beginning, but then conditionalizing it right here. However, if one has received and accepted the parent's love, which is happening this sentence right here, then this is not making the claim that it started out with, because it's conditional on something else. So that's a good point. Aris trying to derail me back into being productive and talking about non-Star Wars things. But yeah, like I said, Luke only believed in his father. Billy Bob didn't, and I think that matters here, because this is where duty mattered more to Billy Bob, but he did right by his father. Luke believed in his father, which is different. Billy Bob did not. Okay. Yeah, so if one has received and accepted the parents' love, one seems to have an extra normative reason to love them. In a similar vein, PJ Ivanhoe says that the only appropriate response to the parents' love is to keep in mind the nature of their love and, in the warmth of this light, to cultivate reciprocal yet distinctive feelings for them. Viper says, I'd rather lose Halle Berry as a girlfriend than learn Carrie Fisher is my sister after she kissed me. Maybe. I mean, kissing your sister once is, like, not a big deal. Like, okay. And especially if you didn't know it. Aris is always up to re-rail the streamer. Yeah, it's the old Shane get on with it. Aris says, and parental love is just so complicated. I think lots of parents love as well as they can, but that love often falls very short for the child. Yeah. DCI, have a good night. Yeah. What's the point of the paper? Well, they're arguing that the virtue ethics account of the relationship between the child and the parent is better than the deontological account. So it says it's better to love your parent and then treat them well than to just have duties to your parents and treat them well. Because, like I'm saying in the Billy Bob case, you could hate your parents, but it would be, this author is saying, it would be better if you also loved your parents and treated them well than just doing what you are doing because, hey, they're your parents and, you know, that's just how it is. Exactly, Vipers. Well, kissing your sister once is not a big deal. Yeah, see, and Valpo's with me on, no, you'd rather have Halle Berry and kiss your sister once. I mean, mistakes get made. What's it called? Yeah. I do not have any sisters. Hey, Frank. I have one brother, and I've kissed him on the cheek, and that's it. Is it not a moot point, though? Well, why, Lumpy? Why? You have to explain why. That's what this person is doing. And you have to remember, a lot of people are not virtue ethicists. They do not like virtue ethics. They like deontological, Kantian, rule-based ethics. And that's what this person is saying is wrong. So it's not that it's obviously right. It's that other people are also wrong. And this person is showing that the big contingent of the rule-based Kantian deontologists are wrong. So it's not enough to be, this person's not just claiming they're right, they're claiming someone else is wrong. So yeah. Is good to love people is quite a ubiquitous value. Well, yeah. I guess it would have been his left cheek? Face cheek, Vipers. Left face cheek. I've never kissed his ass. In any, I don't think, and I think he'd say in any way, metaphorical or not. Give my brother a little bit of shit sometimes. Okay. Yeah, so the point here is that not only is this person a virtue ethicist and they found something they think is obviously true, it's that other people can't say that this is obviously true. And that's the point of the paper, is that if you can say something that should be obviously true and other people can't say it, then their theory is wrong. Okay. If so, an adequate theory of filial piety needs to make sense of this normative significance of filial love. And that's why this right here, this is what they mean by normative significance. Everyone should agree with them. They think that everyone should agree that basically you should love your parents if they loved you, and that's better to do things for them if they loved you. And that's what they mean by normative significance right here. And so this is the point, is that other people are wrong, and this is because this is obviously the way it is. Okay, that is, a good theory should offer the normative ground of loving ones, loving parents, to explain why it is morally important for filial piety to have filial love and to be motivated by such love in acting for them. Viper says, recently you've been having thoughts on virtue ethics. Oh God. I mean, you should go to the doctor. To do justice to the moral importance of filial love, some philosophers make an appeal to the idea of duty, the duty to love. Duty to love, everyone, duty to love. They claim that a child loved by her parents and accepted it has a duty to love them. They list this duty among filial duties. Norman Richards has a view along this line. And social media and Machiavelli, go read The Prince. It's a fun little book. It's like this thick. You can you can blow through it and learn how to be Machiavellian, and it'll be fun. On social media, for that matter. Ooh, that would be a good book. Social Media and Machiavelli. Someone go write that. Okay. According to well, that's just Cambridge Analytica, isn't it? Okay, according to him, if we have accepted a place in our parents' affection and encouraged them to continue to love us when we were younger and under their care, then we have a duty to give our parents a roughly similar experience in our own affections. If you have met this condition, he says, then you do owe some degree of affection in return, partly because to have a central place that you welcome in the affections of another person is so great a good. Simon Keller also seems to support the idea of duty to love when he explains how the duty to be loyal to one's parents involves duties of feeling, including special concern for them. Wow, you have a duty to feel a certain way. So that's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen this claim before, but the idea that you have to feel a certain way because of something that happened. I find that a little bit weird. Who actually is like, well, I have to feel a certain way because of this, the way something happened? That seems like a category mistake. S. Matthew Lau is another philosopher who argues in favor of the idea of duty to love in his recent works. I will argue that there are serious difficulties in the idea of duty to love one's parents, as well as in the general idea of duty to love. I mean, she's obviously right that a duty to love is psychotic. Yeah. I mean, I find that, like, you'd have to go see what Simon Keller here said about it. Because Simon Keller, I think, is actually somewhat of a big name. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But, like, they'd have to, like, have really had to work hard to explain that. But it does seem very strange. I was going to say, how can you make having certain emotions a duty? Exactly. Like, this is, I mean, as Frank says, as I was saying, what the hell is going on right here? No idea what is going on in this literature. But you can see they're concerned about it. They realize that they need to have certain feelings, and it doesn't make sense, and they had to come up with the story. Aristotle says, I think the concern is that you couldn't simultaneously harbor hate for your parents and be an exemplar of filial piety. The behavior and psychological stuff has to cohere. I mean, it just seems like it's better if it coheres. But, like, yeah. I mean, this is what I was saying about the Billy Bob one. He does not like his dad, but he's doing the right thing. He doesn't hate him, though, but he doesn't like him. Viper says, I would argue that we indeed have a duty to feel disgusted by the fact that when we were born, we slid our faces across our mother's vagina. Why do we have a duty? You should just feel disgusted. You don't have to also have a duty to feel disgusted. But like, see, that's the thing. Feelings should not be like, oh, I should, like, let me, it's like one of those, like, I should feel like, what's it called? You know, this is why people get Viagra. They feel like they should be horny and they're not. And they can't get, like, they can't, you know, perform. And so they get Viagra because, like, this is the disconnect. You need Viagra because you feel a certain way. You feel like you have a duty to feel a certain way and your body just is not reacting. It's like, this is a thing. Aris says, we've been deeper in our moms than our dad has. Well, parts of your dad at least got all the way there. But yeah, I guess so. Like, you also might have the duty, but you should feel the disgust anyway. Yeah. I mean, technically, the sperm had to hit the egg, so at a certain point, they were at the same location, but then it expanded out, so yeah. One of the common objections to the idea of duty to love, or the general idea of duty to feel a certain kind of emotion, is the commandability objection. This is what I was saying. How can you, like, automatically force it? Like a firework of cum. Yes. According to this objection, loving someone cannot be a duty because having emotions like love toward a particular person is not sufficiently controllable. That is not something we can bring about at will. Like I said, this is the Viagra you should get, and therefore not commandable. Yeah, you can take Viagra, though. It seems largely agreed that love involves feelings that are not under our voluntary control at the given moment, and that it may also be beyond our power to cultivate over time. The point is that what is not sufficiently controllable cannot be a duty, at least insofar as the familiar principle of ought implies can holds. Barbara Solheim, for example, offers a version of the commandability objection as follows. Our ability to love or generate love involves numerous variables, from our temperaments and personalities to the fund of role models and background experiences we have or lack, to our ability or inability to be fully attuned to others. Although it is true that over time, some who have difficulty loving can learn to love, doing so still involves variables that are to some extent beyond our control. Because of this, love cannot be required as a duty. If she is right, it seems to pose a serious challenge on the idea of duty to love. There is an additional difficulty related to controllability that is specific to the idea of duty to love one's parents. The difficulty is that whether and to what extent a person can love her parents largely depends on how they have treated and educated, or failed to treat and educate, her while raising her. Yeah, and this is the thing. This is the conditionalization again. We're conditionalizing love on your upbringing. And so that's a little shaky on this author's account because they need this. They really need this because of what they said above. It is to a large degree the parent's responsibility to raise their child as someone who can love other people with a genuine heart. Richards even says that it is a parent's obligation to enable his or her child to see that love is to be reciprocated. When the parents fail to raise their child properly, she may become a person who is skeptical about the value of love or lacking emotional resources necessary for loving and caring for someone else. If so, she may grow up to be a person who cannot love another person, including her own parents, through no fault of her own. The main problem here is that the child's being able to love depends on conditions out of her control. Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you have you don't like your parents, then you have to figure stuff out on your own, and it gets harder. Okay. It may be responded that only the parents who do not love their child fail to enable their child to love other people, and that this is not a problem for the idea of duty to love one's parents, since a child does not have a duty to love such unloving parents. Richard may respond along this line, since he claims that whether you have a duty to love your parents, quote, turns on how much they loved you, on how central a place you had in their affections. Filial duties require us to give our parents a roughly similar place in our affections. Viper says, so he's saying that the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. Exactly. But you see how trite that's starting to sound now. And this is what the author is doing. They're making it sound ever more like, you know, they're just, the other people are spouting platitudes. This is the author's strategy going on here. Okay. However, even if we narrow down the scope of duty to love loving parents, the worry remains. For even loving parents may fail to raise their child to be loving. Sounds so cute you almost believe it? Exactly. That's the point. For example, if the parent's love goes to the level of indulging the child, it may spoil their child so that she grows up as an egoistic person who is incapable of loving and caring about someone other than their self. Yeah. Therefore, the fact that the parent's way of upbringing has a major impact on the child's ability to love gives us an additional reason to believe that loving is not sufficiently controllable to be a duty. Many philosophers, however, hold that we can have control of emotions like love, at least to a reasonable degree. Yeah. Yeah, vipers, thank you. Although they admit that we do not have direct control over our feelings and emotions or the ability to have certain feelings of the moment at will, they still reject that we are absolutely passive in our emotions and have no control over what we feel. They argue that we can have sufficient control over our emotions like love because our efforts can affect our emotions over time. We can, according to them, at least indirectly affect how we feel through our long-term efforts. So you can have like an arranged marriage, I think is what they're saying here, and learn to love someone else. Yes, but that's going to even fuck up this person's argument even more, because then it's even less filial piety. You're like forcing yourself to love them out of some other method, and then this author's own account might be messed up at this point if they actually take this line. Okay, they say, for this reason, Nancy Sherman argues that we can have some sort of emotional agency in this sense. We nurture our capacity for intimate love in the context of ongoing relationships and a will to love in certain ways. We often know how to nip unjustified anger in the bud. We can catch overweening pride and curb it. Based on this assumption, Lau argues that the affective aspect of love is sufficiently controllable and thus commandable. He suggests various ways in which we can intentionally bring about or promote the emotional aspect of love. According to him, there are at least 3 ways to bring about particular emotions: giving ourselves reason to have those emotions, reflecting on the reasons why we tend to have particular emotions in particular circumstances, or deliberately placing ourselves in such circumstances. Suppose that, as Liao argues, parents have a duty to love their children. Then, for example, we may bring about our love for our children by giving ourselves a reason to love them, say that children need this emotional aspect of love in order to develop certain fundamental capacities necessary to pursue the basic activities. We may reflect on the fact our antipathy toward the child is due to the fact that the child was unplanned and that the child was born at a time when we already had too many children, or we may have to have enough sleep each night so that we would be more loving towards the child. Yeah, I mean, you can hear how hollow these reasons kind of be, as like, oh, I didn't have enough sleep to like give my child proper attention, and that's why I fucked them up. I mean, this is like, yes, that may be in the case, like, sure, that happens, but like they're saying you didn't force yourself to love them. Again, they're setting these people up for failure. Okay. Given the various possible ways to affect our emotional aspect of love, it seems reasonable to acknowledge that our love is controllable, at least in some sense. The remaining question is to ask whether love is controllable in the right way to ground the alleged duty to love. I'm willing to bet $2 that the author is from a rural religious family. Yeah, I mean, you kind of get a feeling of the sort of thing this person likes to think about. That's a good point, Lumpy. I used to email the authors when I my reviews, and after one of my reviews I said, this is one of the angriest things I've read in a long time. This person, it was about revenge. It was a paper about revenge, and I was like, someone fucked this guy up and they want revenge. And the author got back to me. He said, yes, you were right, someone fucked with me, and instead of like doing something illegal, I wrote this paper. And it's like, you can get the feeling for somebody, and you can see the kind of a lot of times you see it through the examples they use. You can see like little things. It's like you can pick up on it. But like, that was interesting when the person said, yeah, and it was, instead of doing something stupid, I did the healthy thing and I wrote a philosophy paper to get my emotions out. That was a long fucking time ago now. That may have been in the first 100 philosophy roulette papers. Yeah. Maybe not. Maybe the first 150. But like, it was a paper on revenge, and I was like, someone pissed this guy off. Unfortunately, the violence of Phil Papers is still legal. I mean, Vipers, our buddy Ivan Neo is now on the Phil Papers website, getting Phil Papers content. Like, that's what he's done the last like 2 streams or so I saw. Aristotle says, but the weird thing is this. Why individualize filial love so much? Shouldn't there be an emphasis on the filial unit, both presently and over generations, as well as on society? I feel that the author has conceded too much ground to the individualistic conceptions of love, family, and community. Maybe. Now, you see, this is going back to the question earlier, I think, from Lumpy, saying why or is this person writing the paper in the first place? And I think it's not only because they want to support virtue ethics, I think they also want to say deontology is wrong. If you're going to say deontology is wrong, you need very specific examples, and maybe that's why they're doing it, because deontology works for rules for individual people, what should I do should be what, is universalizable. And so if you want to get the deontologist, you have to sort of meet them on their own playing field, and maybe that's where this person's going. It says, well, you don't have your duties on the individual level don't work, but the virtues do. And so you might be right on the general theory, but I think this may actually be part of their strategy to argue against the deontologist. But I don't know yet. We'll just have to see. Okay. Solheim denies that this is it. That it is. Since our efforts to cultivate an emotion do not guarantee our success, to say that we have a responsibility to try to cultivate an emotion is plausible, but to say that we have a responsibility to succeed is not. In response, Liao first points out that it is not necessary that in order to have a duty to V must be something one can bring about with a guaranteed success, supposing that certain reasonable background conditions obtain. For example, he says, while it seems reasonable to say that professional chefs have the duty to make good dishes, no chef can guarantee that their dishes will be good, although they are normally good. Similarly, he argues a duty to love can exist even if the efforts to bring about emotional aspects of love do not promise guaranteed success. I mean, again, this seems so weird. It says you have to at least try to have a relationship with your parents. Like, maybe that's the duty, but to love them when you don't inherently want to? Yeah. You have a duty to V with no success? Yeah. It's like, well, how much have you really tried, Vipers? How much have you really tried? Author says, I guarantee that I agree that guaranteed success is bringing about V is not necessary for there to be a duty to V. Guaranteed success in bringing about is not necessary for there to be a duty to do it. However, there is a problem in the attempt to argue in favor of a duty to love based on the possibility of raising the likelihood of loving someone. One serious problem is that a duty to V is being conflated with the duty to cultivate the ability necessary to V. Strictly speaking, the actions aimed at producing an occurrent loving emotion or cultivating a disposition of loving someone are not themselves part of loving. Rather, the fact that one has to put so many efforts to love that person may be a sign that one does not love her, at least not yet. Loving is the end that those effortful actions aim at. Yeah, see, you don't love them at first. They say you have a duty to try, but trying is not the love. Okay, compare belief. Suppose that there's a duty to believe P, just like the case of love. Since we cannot simply decide to believe something at a given moment, this duty cannot be a duty to believe something at a particular moment. On the other hand, we can choose a course of actions in ways that affect our beliefs. We may have a duty to make choices in ways that are likely to form the belief that the duty requires. For example, one can put oneself in a situation under which she is more likely to form the required belief and try to expose herself more openly to the evidence in favor of that belief. If so, there is such a thing as a duty to believe P. It should mean a duty to do things that tend to raise the likelihood of believing it, rather than the duty to believe it, period. Putting efforts to believe P is not part of believing P. Thus, if there is a duty to believe P unless one actually forms this belief, one entirely fails to fulfill this duty no matter how hard she tried to believe it. I wish he didn't choose those particular letters. I agree. But, there was also a time in college where I was taking, it was mathematical logic or something, and we were doing, it was set theory, and so we were talking about like variables P and A, and so the properties, the property of P-ness and the property of A-ness got brought up at different points, and the teacher was very careful when talking about properties to like switch over to Q's and stuff. So it's like, well, yeah, he was like, you got to watch your P's and Q's when talking about properties. So the P-ness of some object, yes. Similarly, as we cannot simply decide to love our parents, what... Oh, that guy was a funny dude, too. He was a very important set theorist, and I used to go in his like office hours and ask him philosophical questions. It was funny. When was this written? This is like forthcoming, and this is new. So this is probably... It says it's forthcoming in Philosophia. We can like go... Yeah. Let's see if there's a... There's no like easy link. Where's... I can't click on the stupid thing. I'd have to look it up, but like I think it's a new paper. It's like when using C in logic bubbles, you end up saying not C a lot. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, like the negation C, not C. Yeah, and if for all the programmers, I used to do a little programming Java. And I'd always have everything being instead of public, I'd just say pubic and write pubic, and it was very annoying. Yeah, public, static, private. You thought this was written in the 40s? Yeah, I have a feeling that maybe the, English wasn't this person's first language. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's some young dude. I just think English is not his first language. Like, the English is fine. It just seems a little anachronistic. Yeah. Frank said, this whole conversation is a nightmare for me because even if you grant that you can love your parents, there is still no duty. So this is all just nothing. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. This person is arguing against deontologists. I think that's part of this person's goal here. And so it's like, if you don't care about deontology, which I really don't, I'm like, well, that's all fine. But like, we haven't yet got to their positive account. So this is all sort of just set up right now. Hey, Tindarius. Not because of the whole language, the whole discourse. Yeah, I think this person is probably Chinese and in a Confucian, as was mentioned earlier by Valpo. This has a very Confucian feel to it. So if I had to guess, this is maybe not Chinese because of the name, but this is probably someone from that tradition, and so this has this very sort of traditional feel to it. Yeah, Korean. Yeah. Sungwoo is a Korean name. I blanked when I said Chinese. I actually knew. I was like, Sungwoo is not Chinese name, Korean. But yeah, Seoul National University. Yeah, so this is written from the that perspective, which is, fine. It's just not what we always see in the West. Oh, and here we go. We didn't get down to this part in the paragraph yet, but we got our first big Confucian reference dropped. Okay, yeah. So here we go. Similarly, as we cannot simply decide to love our parents, what one can do is just to try to love them. That is, doing things that tend to raise the likelihood of loving them. Trying to love include what a truly loving child would do for her parents, such as visiting and contacting them more frequently, reminding herself of good memories they shared, and focusing on positive qualities of one's parents. Or, as Confucians recommend, one can also read stories of filial children, as in the classic of filial piety, or engage in ritual activities such as regularly meditating on all the things one's parents have done for one, which of course may also cultivate gratitude as well as love for one's parents. Yeah, see, this have done for one is a little awkward for my English my New York ears, but like it's not a problem. That's why I said maybe a second language. But again, yeah, it feels like it's in the Confucian tradition. Aristotle said this dude's Korean. What a pedigree. Oxford and PhD at Duke, which makes sense. David Wong is a leader in Chinese philosophy, and he's at Duke. Okay, so this is where we're at. We're in a Confucian sort of mindset, which is, like I said, fine. It's just not always what we're used to reading here in the West. And Filial says, or you can be objective, think about the positive things they did as positive, but also the bad things they did, and put them on a scale that make a decision was contextual and good for you as a child, especially if you were a victim of violence or neglect. Yeah, I mean, this is like the flip side of this. They had to conditionalize earlier and say, we're not going to talk about the bad things right now. Maybe you should try to like forgive them a little bit, but like this whole paper, we were saying this earlier, it really had to... It'd be one thing if they could just say no filial piety, but they're going to have to say, assuming your parents aren't terrible, then filial piety. So this was the pullback we were talking about at the earlier. It's gonna, like I'm already saying, you're gonna get some grapes on the final review from me, because even if this person makes their point was not as strong as they started out to be. And it might be a good point. So this might be one of the times when you get like the grapes, but not the golden turd. Okay. Interesting little aside. We've got Korean times. I could use an aside. My voice is so fucked. It's annoying. Like, everything's scrapped. You know, I don't talk that much. I really don't talk that much outside of philosophy roulette. And so it's filial piety, greatest heritage of Korea. So not only is this in the Confucian tradition, this is in like specifically Korean tradition too. Thank you, Vipers, for pulling that up. Yeah. Yeah, I'm like running low on water already. Ann says, yeah, this paper doesn't do it for me at all. I'm not the intended audience. Far too damaged. Yeah, well, not damaged. Different culture. Like, they've got people who've had shitty parents or whatever, like different family situations out in Korea too, I'm sure. But like, again, cultural differences. Cultural differences do matter. It does make a difference. So, like, that's the thing. Yeah. Drink, drink, drink. Cough drop. I actually have a regular doctor's checkup next Monday. So maybe I'll ask him to take a look. Alright. Frank says, well, obviously cultures need to brainwash their kids into filial piety, otherwise you might not get return on your investment. Yeah, I mean, everyone has to do that a bit. There's always this. It's like all these things they just said here, which is interesting, that in their tradition they have stories of filial children. Like, they've built this in. You should be giving us back this stuff. And you can always see this also in sort of like the gay panic. Oh, I'm not gonna get a grandkid. Like, you owe me a grandkid and stuff. And like, if their kids are gay, they're not gonna have like a grandkid or whatever. And it's like this sort of thing. Like, you owe me. It's like, yeah, they have to brainwash their kids into doing what they want. So you gotta wonder sometimes: are the parents really doing this because they like they love their kids, or are they getting something out of it? Who knows? Okay. However, such effortful activities do not themselves constitute loving. The important point is that loving is not an activity that consists of putting one's efforts to generate the emotional state and succeeding in it. I suspect that the proponents of duty to love, including Liao, conflate the alleged duty to love with the duty to produce the disposition to feel loving emotion. Frank says, oh, the parents were brainwashed too, so it's not entirely their fault, so bogus though. Well, this is culture. You just brainwash all the way down, and then you call it a nice name. You call it culture after a while. And sometimes you have to get rid of that. Yeah. Loving begins when the efforts to produce loving emotion ends. Once such an emotional disposition is formed, then what the subject does and feels afterward would begin to constitute her loving for the first time. In other words, it is only after the success of these efforts to love that loving begins. Those efforts are not part of fulfilling the alleged duty to love at all, regardless of whether they succeed in bringing about the targeted emotion. Rather, they are fulfilling the duty to produce the disposition to feel love. I acknowledge that, in reality, most people's love has its ups and downs, and thus it is not so mechanical that at first when you make the effort, then you'll love. At least sometimes you love, but you are also making the effort to keep yourself in the position to love in the face of changing circumstances and changes in people. Still, the efforts to keep loving someone, just like the efforts to cultivate the love for the given person, are not themselves part of loving, although they might be important to protecting the loving relationship. Brainwash would be a good name for a cocktail. Well, there is a mind eraser. I had it once. I don't remember what happened the rest of the night. Yeah, mind eraser. Yeah, I remember the night. I remember leading up to it. They got me a Long Island iced tea and a mind eraser, and I was just gone. Hell, I think I was 16 I was 16 back then. Maybe I was 19. I forget. Who knows? Lumpy said, many people would argue that I'm wrong to choose to be childless because they won't be able to nurse me when I'm old and incapacitated, or simply not to be lonely later in life. It's amazing how many people reproduce for selfish reasons, like I'll pay a real nurse and go online to make new friends. Yeah. That's the thing. And that's why you hear this all the time. Like, don't you want to be married so you have someone when you're old? It's like, well, if I need companionship, do I have to blackmail into someone not divorcing me or something? is that really what you want to do? Is like that how you go about it? Like, maybe you can't make friends, I can make friends. You can buy love? Yeah, how much did it cost, Dan? How much did it cost you? Okay. Filial love and the virtue of filial piety. Companionship in our old age is the best case use for AI, says Frank. I mean, there's going to be other old people there, but yeah, that is definitely going to be one of a good use case. Like, you need someone there with you that can put up with your bullshit, and computers, if they can be a good companion and put up with your bullshit, that'll be great. If you get married, you'll ruin your chances with Amaranth? I don't know, maybe Amaranth is down with that. Frank says, yeah, but I won't be able to hang out with old people. Yeah, you won't want to. I don't blame you. Old people complain about, like, their medical problems a lot. Alright, so we're finally to, like, the main part of, like, this person's account. We're about halfway through. I've been talking for way too long. So, filial love and the virtue of filial piety. Old people fuck, though. Yeah, they do. That's where all the, I heard a few years ago, the statistics on STDs were just massive in the geriatric community. I mean, you're not worried about getting pregnant. I mean, just go get your, tubes tied, but then again, STDs. But yeah. Author has argued that the idea of duty to love one's parents faces serious problems. In this section, I would like to argue that a virtue-ethical approach to filial love has theoretical advantage. The author argues with P.J. Ivanhoe that seeing what is called for is a certain critically informed attitude or state of character shows why filial piety is best thought of as a virtue. You can't wait till your menopause and comes and you mean it? Yeah, I mean, you don't gotta worry about kids anymore. And, like, the surgeries are very expensive and way more dangerous than guys getting their tubes tied. Okay, virtue involves having the right kind of feelings, not just the right kind of actions. A virtuous person acts motivated by appropriate inner states rather than acting mainly motivated by a sense of duty. From a virtue ethical perspective, feeling appropriate emotions partly constitutes a living a good life as a human being, as performing appropriate actions does. As virtue ethics advises us to live a good life, feeling and cultivating the disposition to feel appropriate emotions have normative significance. Thus, I would like to suggest that filial love can be best understood when it is viewed as a part of virtue, in particular filial piety. Lumpy says, "Wah ha 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 ha." Well, I do complain about my feet, and I'm constantly getting laid since I went above 40. There you go. The trick is to feel young, to wear Warhammer 40k t-shirts. Yeah, well, if you have enough money for Warhammer 40k, maybe it's just a money thing. Because Warhammer 40k ain't cheap. Viper says when you get Alzheimer's, you can have sex with the same person as like the first time every time. Boom. Wait, what's that's immature, different word? Oh. Wait, what's immature? Just Warhammer 40k? Yeah, maybe. But, there's nothing wrong with Warhammer. Apparently people really like it. I don't know enough about it. But if you play the games, like, you have like a million little figurines to buy, like these whole things. Apparently it's a whole like involved like nerdcore thing. I was watching Excessive Profanity, who's a great streamer here on Twitch. You don't do miniatures, just the lore in video games. Exactly. I was watching Excessive Profanity, who's worth checking out if anyone cares. Paint miniatures. But he's a Australian, says cunt every 15 words. I mean, he's not even got excessive profanity anymore, but he does swear a lot. But yeah, but if you want like another talkie stream, yeah, he's cool. Okay, if we understand filial love as partly constitutive of filial piety as virtue, a person who lacks love for her parents for their own sake or other constitutive emotional or motivational inner attitudes would lack full virtue of filial piety. Every 15 words amateur. He used to be a video game critic, so he is like talking about the video games a lot of times when he's playing them. So it's like, yeah, he has other things to say. Other things being equal, if one child loves her parents while the other one doesn't, we can say the former is more filial or more virtuous as a child than the latter, at least in that regard. There are two aspects of filial love that need to be explained. On the one hand, although there are some ways to raise the probability of producing filial love, feeling appropriate emotional states seem to be beyond our direct control. On the other hand, At least insofar as our parents have loved and care about us, loving them does not seem to be morally optional. That is, it seems that a person who lacks filial love for one's parents deserve at least some sort of negative moral evaluation or moral criticism. Is it more filial to love? They're saying if all else is equal, Frank, between two kids, and one loves their parents for the right reasons and the other one doesn't, then the one who loves them is more filial, yes. But that's the all else is equal. Like, they're exactly the same in every other regard. Like, the parents are deserving of love, all that sort of stuff. As Lawrence Blum says, what has moral significance goes far beyond what can be made an object of duty or obligation. I believe it should be explained why a person who fails to love her parents deserves some negative moral evaluation. Let me begin by introducing two kinds of moral evaluation. The evaluation of blameworthiness or praiseworthiness, and that of viciousness or virtuousness. Well, one may be blameworthy only for something that is under her control, voluntary control, at least to a reasonable extent. One can be criticized as being vicious or not being virtuous, even for what is not under her voluntary control. I mean, you have to work on your own virtues. And so the idea that you're vicious just means that you did not properly create your virtue, and then, I mean, that might be someone else's fault. But are you blameworthy for someone else treating you bad and not letting you cultivate your virtue? I don't know. All right, but the author says, based on this distinction, Nicholas Bomarito shows how emotions can be subject to the latter kind of moral evaluation. Quote, if we cannot be blameworthy for involuntary states, such states can still make one a morally worse person. Even if someone with involuntary racist emotions is not blameworthy for those emotions, they still reflect poorly on his moral character. He would, after all, be a better person if he did not have those emotions. Learning that someone else feels racial contempt, greed, or envy leads us to revise our assessment of their moral character, even if we know that they can't help but have such feelings. Blame and viciousness are distinct moral evaluations. If nature has made it so that I cannot help but have sexist attitudes, nature has thereby made me vicious. If I truly have no control over my attitudes, I may not be responsible for such attitudes, but that is a separate question. In any case, such attitudes are a blemish on my moral character, and I would be a better person without them. Frank says, my instinct, if they perform the same behaviors, they're equally filial. Well, this author completely disagrees. He says you have to perform the same behaviors, but you have to do it for the right reasons. So again, this was my example with Monsters Ball. Billy Bob Thornton puts his dad in like the best possible nursing home, but he hates his dad and he's trying to get rid of him. Now he also had trouble taking care of his dad, and that was another reason that he had to put him in a nursing home. But basically, if he loved his dad and was doing it to give him the best possible care, it would be a different situation. And this author would say putting your father in the best possible care would be the best outcome versus the one where you're just doing it because, well, he's your father and so there it is. Yeah. Thanks, Frank. I try to have good examples. That's one of the things I try very hard on, to have examples people can, that will be generally accessible to people. You see, this is weird though. What they just said here. They're saying, look, you're a vicious person and it's your fault. I want to know the relative distinction from where you used to be to where you are now. Maybe you're racist. Maybe you are much, much, much less racist than you used to be, and you should be commended for that. Would it be better if you were not racist? Yeah. But if anyone realized where you started from and then where you ended up, maybe you should be commended for being only as racist as you are, depending where you started out. It takes time to, do things. According to this view, Rethia says, you want a 1-year graph on shitty person people before judgment. Yeah, you're right, Rethia. That was completely excessive of me. You do not always get that. But I'm in the theoretical case here that they're mentioning. I'm just saying it doesn't work as like a blanket account. There are like, you could, you could say, look, yeah, being vicious is bad, being racist is bad, but like, not everyone has like an opportunity to not be racist because all they knew when they were growing up was racism, and then all of a sudden they leave their little like bubble, and then people are like, you're racist, and they're like, what? I didn't do anything wrong. Who knows? But yeah, it would be nice. My point is that, yeah, maybe this is not so easy to just say just because they're racist, it's all their fault, like it's bad. There are situations when being vicious is good. By definition, in philosophy, they say vicious is bad. You just may mean excessive or like very, very going very hard, perhaps very strong. But usually in philosophy, they tend to mean being vicious is a bad thing. I mean, it's like, what's it called? What is that thing where you just like beat the shit out of somebody and like you snap? Well, no, yeah. You viciously eradicate a plague. Yeah, see, that would just be like, the philosophers in this area wouldn't use vicious in that way. They'd use some other word, but like that's a semantics issue. Frank says, this kind of snap virtue judgment enhances attribution errors. You said something rude, I'm assuming you're not virtuous. Done. Yeah. That's fair. That's probably a better way to say what I was trying, better way of putting my point, that you can't really always assume that they're vicious when you don't really understand. It's a little too quick to make that kind of snap judgment. Yeah. Okay. According to this view, a certain kind of emotion or lack thereof can be a ground for a negative moral evaluation of the agent's character, that is, the evaluation of viciousness, independently of whether her voluntary actions or omissions are responsible for having or lacking such emotions. We can apply this point to filial love. If the virtue of filial piety involves loving one's loving parents, again, see, they're having to go back to this hedging right here, where they're conditionalizing on the parents, then lack of filial love would provide us with the ground to judge that the subject in question is at least less than fully virtuous. Yeah, and see right there, you have to, you say the loving parents, but right there, that is giving us the backstory that Rhetheus was asking for. See, that's very funny right there. It's a kind of a weird thing. You're making a snap judgment on someone, but then you're also knowing their backstory. Yeah. Rhetheus, I live in language for a living, so no, that's a good point, Rhetheus. No, that's exactly the point. Like that, sometimes the words do matter. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Baby, don't hurt me no more. I want my throat not to hurt me no more. Okay. Yeah, so then lack of filial love would provide us with a ground to judge that the subject is at least less than fully virtuous or incompletely virtuous as their child. Yeah, so this is the weird spot where they had to conditionalize and then say, and then make a snap judgment. We know your parents are good, and then we know you're an asshole because you didn't act like sufficiently filial in this one moment. And now they're going to walk it back a little bit. It would sound too harsh to say that a child is vicious for lacking filial love, especially if she sufficiently performs filial acts. So yeah, so this is the duty, like, duck out right here. This is like, all right, now it's not entirely that they're vicious, but like, they are still filial, but not completely filial. Sing it, Socrates. Inability to love does not always set the given agent free from moral evaluation insofar as the basis of the inability is her own character. That is, if the defect in character is the reason for the inability, then the character is subject to moral criticism. If so, we can explain why it is morally important to have filial love without relying on the idea of duty to love one's loving parents. Filial love is important because it serves as a ground for the moral evaluation of one's character, regardless of whether having it is within one's control. You see, this is like, they had a hedge a lot up here. Now they're saying, well, now you should be loving your parents, and we can evaluate people because of that. This is real strong. Tindarius says, in psychology, there's a phenomenon of trauma where two people have the same experience, but it turns out differently, leading to PTSD in one, but not in the other. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is going to be based on personal histories. A lot of it. And this is the thing. This is why they keep having to repeat your loving one's loving parents. So loving one's loving parents. They're trying to sneak the history in here. And that's exactly it. Because there's going to be different histories. Yeah, so Julia Driver also lends support to this point when she says a child may have not duty to love a parent as opposed to a duty to feel gratitude, but failure to love under some circumstances can reveal something very bad about a person's character that may still warrant negative evaluation. And so, yeah, and she doesn't evaluate. And bye-bye. Have a good time. Rest of your time. Life. Yes. Have a great life. Night, Ann. Thanks for being here. Yeah. It is true that, yeah, so again, if you know someone had cool parents and then they turn out to be a shithead, thanks for the shout out. For Ann, everyone should go follow Ann. If you like, again, they do have a point here that if you do know someone's back history and then they turn out to be a shithead, maybe that is a good reason not to like them. But the problem is they made it in this snap judgment sort of way. They want to say the loving parents and then you turn out not to love them, and it's weird. Good night, Lumpy. Have a great night and thanks for being here. So, yeah, getting a little bit late at this point on the East Coast. Frank says, how is failure to love under some circumstances can reveal something very bad about a person's character, not constitute a duty to love? Well, that's what they're saying, but they're saying it's not because it's a duty, it's because it's a moral failing. And the moral failing is a virtuous thing because the duty account they think doesn't work. So if it's not a duty, what is it? Well, you're vicious. You lack virtue. And so it's the failure is a lack of virtue that you have. That's what the author is arguing here. It's not a duty, it's something else. And so since they already argued that the duty account doesn't work, they had to, build up their virtue account, which they kind of, I think, hand-waved at. I didn't love this argument here. And so that's kind of what they did. And so they're saying you're just a vicious person. Okay. So the author continues, it is true that emotional states unexpressed in actions are hard to detect. I think this is why it is relatively hard to observe a case where someone gives a moral criticism to another for merely having such emotions. However, moral criticism on having or lacking certain kinds of emotions is part of our common experiences since we often make such criticisms of ourselves. For example, if we have an emotion that we judge to reflect viciousness, we tend to feel shame or even disgust. The issue is not necessarily about whether they are likely to lead to any wrong actions. The criticism is made just on feeling an inappropriate emotion or lacking an appropriate one. For example, one may feel ashamed of not feeling grateful to one who has been supporting her both financially and materially, while acting as a grateful person would act, though out of a sense of duty. Similarly, one may feel ashamed of not feeling the loving emotion for one's parents. Yeah, so again, like if you don't feel like someone helped you and you don't feel like happy or thankful to them, you might think you have failed in some sense on an emotional level. And that does make sense. Now, is this strong enough to support what's above it? I don't think so, but because they're making the specific case about love. But again, that's what they're saying. You should love your parents, and if you are acting inappropriately, then you might think something's wrong with you. It's like, why can't I feel appropriately happy about this situation that is good? Maybe then that is a good point. If you are not happy about things that you should be happy about, or feel loving about things you should be loving about, maybe there's more to it. Okay. When we are ashamed of ourselves for feeling or failing to feel a certain kind of emotion, the object of shame is not necessarily what I have done or failed to do to bring about or eliminate that emotion. It's about the fact that the emotion is felt out of one's character, which speaks badly of one's character. Whether a person is subject to a moral criticism for X is not entirely determined by what is within her control or whether X is voluntary. It only distinguishes whether one is subject to the evaluation of blameworthiness or that of viciousness, both of which are moral evaluations. Rather, whether a given person is subject to moral criticism for X is determined by whether X reflects her value commitment or not. Yeah. Okay. If a person lacks what a virtuous person would have due to some factor that has nothing to do with her value commitment, then she would not be subject to moral criticism. For example, if a person fails to feel grateful to her benefactor just because she is an ungrateful person, then she is still to be criticized for being vicious, in particular for being ungrateful. In contrast, if the agent fails fails to feel grateful because of her mental illness related to memory loss, then she would not be subject to a comparable moral criticism. See, again, this is kind of walking back the love thing from above, where they're saying, okay, maybe it's a mental illness, but like that stuff from above where you can make the snap judgment, all of a sudden you have to pull out the history of a mental illness here. You need to go tell the backstory. Okay, see, again, starting to hedge more. It might be argued that. Why are you doing this, author? Don't be might be arguing nothing. Just argue. Not be it might be argued that. Come on. It might be argued that filial love's role as a ground for a negative moral evaluation, in particular of that of viciousness, does not adequately capture its normative significance. This sort of evaluation, it might be claimed, is not very different from merely aesthetic evaluation in its normative force, given that it loses its connection with the agent's voluntary agency, which seems to be central to anything that has normative significance. Frank says they need to bite the bullet and just say that being unloving is vicious, period, no matter the circumstances. Yeah, that's kind of where they should have gone for a stronger thing here, and that they can't just evaporates their credibility. Well, they're doing the thing where they're making their claim and then they're trying to say, well, it matters for most people most of the time. But yeah, this is they're walking back a lot of their stuff. So this is going to be a this is the exact sort of paper I made the grapes thing for, where it's the shriveled up grapes. It's like this is making a started off strong and then everything's getting pulled back. Their arguments aren't bad, it's just they have to hedge way too many times, and then so everything is just shriveling up on them. Okay. The claim may be that although both evaluation of blameworthiness and that of viciousness are both value judgments, the latter, like purely aesthetic evaluation, does not have sufficient normative implication. For example, the judgment that someone is not beautiful is a value judgment, but does not necessarily imply that the agent ought to do something to make some change about it. Similarly, it might be argued that the judgment on lack of filial love, that someone is less than fully virtuous as a child, does not necessarily imply that she ought to do something about it, especially in the cases where the agent is incapable of loving her parents. Yeah, now they're saying, well, what if the child is defective? My first response is that having or lacking a certain kind of emotion is relevant to our evaluation of the agent's moral character, while her appearance is not. That is, although neither kind of value judgment presupposes the agent's voluntary control, the evaluation of viciousness seems to fall under the category of moral character, while the evaluation of beauty does not. I believe the view that morality only concerns the aspects that are under our voluntary control is a myth, given that our life and character involve much more than what we do through voluntary agency. Okay, so they're saying, this is fine, but this is also, it might sound like they're pulling back right here, but this is part of virtue ethics. You don't get control of everything. Like, that's just sort of the Aristotelian virtue ethics. And maybe, I don't know about the Confucian version, but like, as Aris is always saying, your circumstances do matter. And so, you don't get full control. That's fine. Moreover, if filial love is understood as a constitutive part of virtue, in particular of filial piety, there is a sense in which we can say that filial piety demands the agent to love her parents. Thus, if the agent fails to respond to this demand of filial piety by failing to love her parents, she is subject to a kind of negative moral evaluation. I believe this is how the virtue ethical approach can do justice to the normative significance of filial love without relying on the idea of duty to love. Viper says, what if the parent has really bad persistent BO, and while loving, every attempt to get close is offensive to the child's nose, so they were never able to bond? Yeah, I guess that would be a circumstances thing. Like, extreme body odor would be one of these circumstances that would be not within the child's control. And so then they wouldn't be, it would be, that would be something out of their control. Yeah, see, Frank says demand is a duty, but see, again, they're trying to say that if all else is equal and the child doesn't love and they should be able to love, then something's bad with them because they should automatically be able to be virtuous when it comes to love. Like, you should just be able to love. And that's what's behind this. It says that it's not that you have a duty to love, it's that you are a defective human being. You are a vicious, a morally defective person if you cannot love in a circumstance where you should be able to love. And so that's the demand here. They're calling you you have defective virtues, basically. Here we go. Frank, author says, let me clarify what I mean by saying a virtue demands something. So they knew. Someone said the exact thing you said. Why are you not clicky? There we go. Clicky. Clicky. Okay. By saying that a virtue V demands an agent A to X in a given situation S, I mean that an agent with the full virtue of V would characteristically respond to the situation at S by Xing. This understanding of a virtue's demand is inspired by Julia Annas, who understands the guidance in terms of virtues as guidance as demand. That a certain action is the brave or considerate or generous thing to do creates a demand that is to be that it be done, and if it is the action that I am in a position to do, it creates a demand that I do it. Annas illustrates how a virtue makes a demand as follows. Quote, suppose, to give an example, I come across a picnic litter in a scenic place. I do not want to pick up the litter. I take it that nobody does. To the extent that I am a considerate person, I will feel that picking up the litter is the right thing to do, that I ought to do it, should do it. End quote. Yes. So this is the point. You're a virtuous person. The virtue creates a demand post facto. So it's after the fact. You don't have a duty to do it before the thing. You have a demand to do it from the fact that you are a good person. You feel the need to do it after you had the virtue. So the virtue came first, the duty comes second. Or the demand, I guess they call it. Alright, so in this example, according to her, the virtue of considerateness demands that I pick up the litter, which is why it is the right thing for me to do. This, end quote, this is what she calls a demand of virtue, and I think that it can be extended to cover what the agent feels as well as what she does. Filial piety demands that I feel love and gratitude to my loving and caring parents. If I fail to feel these emotions to my parents, then I would be less than fully filial in that regard, just like when I fail to act to help and benefit them. Frank says, but when you have a duty to do something, you only have that duty insofar as you have the virtue of taking duties seriously. Well, again, I think maybe this is just a semantic trick on the part of the author. They're not calling it a duty, they're calling it a demand. You don't have... this person saying, look, the virtue comes first, the duty to act on your virtue comes second, else you are failing to act in accordance with your virtues. And that would be weird, because why would you do that? And so you should, act on it. But they're just sort of naming this acting thing, that acting on the virtues. They're just sort of naming it. They're not saying there is actually a duty there. They're calling the fact that you act how you feel you should act. That's the demand. So it's weird. But yeah. Frank says if they contort their virtue into the shape of duties, they no longer dodge the problem they had with the duties from the start. No, because the setup is different. They say you are having the virtue, and then they're calling part of your virtue the duty, but the virtue had to come first. And that's the difference. In the deontological way, you start off with the duty. In the virtue ethics way, you start off with the virtue, and then you can sort of say, well, acting on the virtue is something else. And so this is maybe just a semantic trick, but they're still sort of starting with that. Now, maybe you don't like that, that's fair, but it's still the sort of the way where the motivation starts. Is it starting in a virtue, or is it starting in a duty? That's what the point is. Good night, Vipers. Thank you for being here. Thanks for the shout outs and other activities. Good luck with your duty to V, Vipers. Yeah, I'm losing all my European people. It's okay. Maybe I can stream during the day one day. Who knows? Okay. Note that the demand of virtue does not necessarily imply that it is felt as a demand by the agent. A fully virtuous person feels it is almost as if it were her second nature, and as Annis points out, it will normally be felt as a demand. Yeah, see, there's a thing. It's just happening, and they're just naming this part of what you feel you need to do. Normally be felt as a demand by the learner and the incompetent and the incompletely virtuous. If an agent fully possesses the virtue V, then she would not feel the demand of V as a demand. Then a fully filial person who loves her parents already normally wouldn't feel loving them as a demand and wouldn't even think about the possibility of not loving them. One advantage of the virtue ethical approach to filial love is that we can make sense of its normative significance appropriately considering how virtuous the given agent is. That is, virtue ethics makes a different command according to the level of the virtuousness of the agent in question. Virtue ethics commands the agent do whatever she can to cultivate and exercise her virtue. That is, what it commands the agent is to do what one can do at the moment to get as close as possible to living virtuously. Thus, both a non-loving child who struggles to love her parents and acts as if she does, and a loving child who acts for her parents out of love are doing their best to achieve the ideal of living as a filial child. Given the difference in the ability to love their parents at the moment, it is inappropriate to blame the non-loving child for failing to fulfill any duty, for doing anything wrong, insofar as she is doing her best under the given condition. This is why I think the virtue ethical approach to filial love can avoid the commandability objection. Yeah, because the person has some virtue, and therefore is trying to do the right thing, but their virtue is just very weak. Yeah. No, Frank, I think I know what you're saying. This person is doing I think this person is working very hard, and they're working very hard because people like you exist, and people like you called them out, and the last 2 pages are basically them trying to explain away why they disagree with you. So you're not bad at explaining. This person's fighting very hard, tooth and nail, to say you are wrong, and I think they're not doing a great job at it because they're trying to make basically a linguistic trick to save part of their account, because otherwise they would need to appeal to the rule-based system. And they're saying, well, when you have only a little bit of virtue, then you get the feeling like you should do something, and then you know to do the rule thing. Yeah. Frank says, the thing in my head has to do with the virtue and deontology describing the same things, and the flaw with deontology is that is too jagged and grainy, and they're making their virtue jagged and grainy to look like deontology does. Yeah, but that's what they just had to do. It was weak virtue, so it's jagged and grainy. That's exactly what's happening right here. Yep. And they're trying to do it because otherwise everyone would just act perfectly, and they'd be calling everyone just bad children then. This seems like a cool paper, but you joined to page 18. This is an interesting paper. It is, yeah, I mean, it's basically 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Oh, God, I got to get to 23. But, yeah, we're on 18. We're almost done, really. Basically, yeah. They've had to work very hard to, because otherwise they're calling everyone vicious right here. Because no one loves their parents perfectly, and so you're still going to feel the duties to do stuff. And so, yeah, this is why they're working. So, anyway, let's get this done. We got, 4 more pages. Virtue demands a non-virtuous person to act as a virtuous person would act. See, this seems like a duty right here. Demands, but they're calling the demand just weak virtue. Yeah. No, you don't have to stop. If you have to translate your virtue into a rule, which language like demand does, then they're giving up on the good thing about virtues. No. You don't have to stop, but they're not. They're interpreting the result of the virtues in a rule-based system. But again, you have to remember the metaphysics starts with virtue. Now, is this going to work? Maybe not, but you still, this is why it is a virtue theory paper. You have to start with virtue. You have to remember that they are starting with virtue. Does this work? Yes or no? Maybe not, but you have to take them seriously. You have to start with virtue and then say, can they make a rule-based system out of their virtues? And if they can do it, then they have both virtue ethics and deontology. Now, they're saying the failure of virtues basically makes a demands rule-based system, which is weird, but they're still not a deontologist. They're just saying part of virtue ethics is deontologic-like. Yeah. Okay. There are 2 important points in this demand. First, a non-virtuous person can become more virtuous by imitating a virtuous person's act, since, as Aristotle famously says, a person becomes virtuous by performing virtuous actions. We become just by doing just actions, temperate by doing temperate actions, and brave by doing brave actions. Yeah, see, this is the habit theory of virtue, and this goes back, and you can see how this is very rule followy. You follow the actions of virtuous people, but again, yeah, so it seems like a rule, but this is part and parcel of what it is to do virtue ethics, though. So like you're not off by like a big difference, but like you see this person's having to bring the rules in. In this sense, acting as a loving child would act is an effective way for a not yet fully filial person to cultivate filial love. Acting as a loving child would act, unlike actually feeling the emotion of filial love, is something even a non-loving child can do. Moreover, acting as a loving child would can count as a meeting the minimal demand to perform beneficent actions for our parents, although those actions would have a more ethical value if they were motivated by filial love. Benefiting or helping one's parents is an important behavioral aspect of filial piety, which has a significance that goes beyond mere imitation or cultivation of virtue. This is sort of starting off on the minimal thing, which also, this is what they said, this is the highest amount the rule base could get, but the virtue starts with the minimal. So, yeah. For example, actions such as offering financial support or medical care to our parents have moral significance independently of the underlying motivational state. Thus, for a person who is not yet able to feel love or be motivated by love in benefiting and helping our parents at the moment of action, performing those actions from an available motivation for her at the moment would be the best she can do to get closer to living as a fully virtuous person would do. Thus, from this perspective, virtue ethics can advise even to a non-loving child to try to love her parents and act as a loving child would act. This is true regardless of whether she can actually love them, since she can at least try to love them or act as if she does. Yeah, and so at this point, we've just recapitulated the deontological approach. In the case of a fully virtuous person, virtue ethics tells her to exercise the virtue she already has. See, this is poorly stated. It doesn't tell her anything, you just would do it. It is likely that this demand of virtue to feel and act appropriately would not even be perceived as a demand, since her inclination is in line with what it demands. Yeah, so they're using the deontological speech, but it's not really accurate. MDD, what's up? How you doing anyway? I think we have to be careful between the way we classify rules, otherwise we could also charge a utilitarian with being like a deontologist, like giving us the rule we ought to act in a way which maximizes the overall human pleasure and demanding that we abide by it. Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing. It gets very sticky. You can sort of start sliding between all the ethics at that point. So, yes. If a person, and then you can have a rule to act in accordance with virtues. And then everything's deontological. Or if virtue ethics says, well, the greatest virtue is to make the most happiness, then you've created a consequentialist virtue ethics. So it's like you can just sort of interdefine all this stuff if you want. Okay, you think you're misunderstanding deontology then. Well, what's fundamental, Frank? That's the question here. What is fundamental? Is it the rules or is it the virtues, like a disposition? And if it's a disposition, then you're a virtue ethicist. If it's some abstract rule system, then you're a deontologist. And if it's just happiness and the consequences, then you're a utilitarian. But you have to say, what is the fundamental thing to ethics? Yeah, so in this case, it's virtues. Valpo says, I think that's right. Utilitarians have just one rule. Deontologists tend to have more, and they don't murder. Like, for example, don't murder and don't lie. Yeah. So maybe you could count the rules between consequentialists and deontologists, but you can, like I said, interdefinable if you want to do it that way. Like maybe you could say all the deontological rules all are just strategies for getting the best possible consequences. Like whatever, you can make all this crap up. Frank says, but if you can only describe virtues by listing rules, then the distinction seems meaningless to you. No, because you don't list the rules in virtue ethics. That's not how you go about it. You do form it by habits and doing good things, which are not rule-based. You find out what you do it by experience, you work at it. And so it's not, you don't list the rules. So that would, they would know that, Frank. Aristotle doesn't fuck up that bad. Yeah. So, yeah. Now, could a rule help then? Maybe once you start on the road to getting virtues. But, like, again, that would be sort of, it wouldn't be a hard and fast rule. It would only be a quick and fast rule. It wouldn't be like a universal rule. It would be a rule that helped you at that time. So, again, the rule wouldn't be fundamental. So yeah, if a person already has a full virtue of filial piety and thus loves her parents, and then there is no need for any further normative requirement, since all she ought to do is to feel and act from her character. Democracy is fake. Sure. What's up, Newtonia? You're convinced of it. Dun dun dun. Well, congratulations. We haven't had like a proper democracy in, God, I don't know if we ever did. But is democracy gay? You need more arguments. I don't know. Does democracy love other democracies, or does it love it? Yeah, does it is like homo democrato something? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know how democracy loves another democracy, or does it like love authoritarianism, and then it would be hetero filio democrat like cratic something. Yeah, I don't know. What are you trying to argue for? Democracy being gay, it being fake, you being convinced of it, or do you need arguments about needing more arguments? Let me know. Okay. Even if there is such a thing as a duty to love, it seems to sit very awkwardly with the both non-loving and loving children. For a non-loving child, it would be to require something she cannot do, at least at a given moment, thereby rendering the requirement of duty futile. For a loving child, on the other hand, it would be requiring something she is already doing or inclined to do or feel, thereby rendering the requirement of duty redundant. It is interesting that neither a non-loving nor a loving child can simply decide to love or not to love at will, though in different senses. You need no arguments on whether democracy is fake. It is fake, okay, period. Good to know, but the statement democracy is fake and gay, I'm still hung up on the second part. Yeah, you're going to have to define your terms better, because I'm not sure how democracy falls in love with anything. Because democracy is a form of government. And how does a form of government love other forms of government, or maybe other things? But for it to be gay, it would have to love other forms of government of the same gender. And I don't know if forms of government have genders, or exactly all the metaphysics there. Yeah, So MDD says, yeah, duty really struggles when it comes to love. Yeah, this is finally getting to a point. This here is their best argument so far about why duties and love are a problem. Because you're either supposed to feel it, and then you don't need the duty, or if you don't have it, then the duty isn't going to make you love anyone. But this is not a new argument. It's like duties never made you feel. This is going all the way back to the beginning. This person had a quote that said, like, that's not how duty and feelings work. No, you don't think of democracy as the same system as the metric that makes one gay. Well, what would make one gay then? I mean, that is kind of what gay means. Unless if you're using it as a slur or insult, which is just kind of lame for you to do. Or if you're using it in some other way, but then please explain. MDD says, I love X not because of some duty to love them, but I wish the best for them. This seems to be a thorn for pure deontologists. Yeah, that is the author's point. No, I think that's exactly right. And like I said, we're on what page 20 now. They said like all the way back up, like here, I think they, yeah, when they were criticizing here, this is the commandability objection right here. So like they said it here on page 6. You think your difficulty is you don't believe deontology is real? Like, is it like a crappy theory, or you're just always reducing it to something else? But there are definitely deontologists out there. Like, that's not even a question. There are definitely deontologists. Thanks for the lurk, Aris. I'll see you soon. M. Newton says, if it increases the likelihood of people in society that adopted the system to adopt the archetype of being gay. What's an archetype of being gay? I don't know what archetypes are in this case. If it increases the likelihood of people in a society that adopted system to adopt the archetype of being gay. So you're saying democracy leads to being more gay people. That's what you're saying? Like there's more gay people because democracy somehow causes that? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, basically. Oh, okay. Does democracy cause there to be more gay people? I mean, I don't see how form of government would make people's opinions of what they want to do with each other is, the commandability exception. Yeah, I don't see how the forms of government are that involved in people's daily life to make them fall in love with other people. That'd be a really long chain of reasoning to get from form of government to like how people interact with each other. Now, of course, government does have something to do with how people interact because they make laws. They make certain things illegal or illegal. But I don't see how democracy does that in any way? Like, because wouldn't the people who were there make rules about, whatever the people wanted? So why would that actually make the people gay if they weren't already gay? Why would the laws that the people made themselves make them more gay than they already were? Like, I don't see, I mean, how does that happen? Like, I'm not saying it can happen. I'm just saying it just seems like a very long sort of trip. Okay, yeah, but then why would the people who are making the rules do it? Like, again, it seems like a very long trip. Like, is there like some cabal to make everyone gay and they're the ones running the country? Like the democracy? Again, that wouldn't be a democracy then. That would be an authoritarian gay regime out to make everyone gay. So I don't understand how that would work. Cryonic says, as a gay person, I can say that democracy is not conducive to homosexuality. Yeah, I mean, I buy that. I don't think we've been very nice to gay people overall in the United States. Only recently have things gotten, I think, a little bit better. It seems to be on the, backslide at the moment. But yeah. It's been proven that people don't make the rules. Well, then it's not a democracy anymore either. So then what are you saying? If it's not a democracy, then democracy isn't making anyone gay, because there is no democracy if it's fake. Well, democracy is purely the rule of the hidden plutocratic elite. Well, then plutocratic elites make people gay. That's a different argument, not democracy. MDD says, see, I just heard this objection from a random non-philosophy person on YouTube, and I was so surprised how much it stuck with me the more I thought about it. Cool. You see, you can't say democracy is making you gay, then say there's no democracy if it's plutocrats. So, well, I mean, I'm not surprised. But democracy is, well, you could say, no, it's not a rule. It's just a fake name then. I mean, maybe that's propaganda, but it's not a rule of the hidden plutocratic elite. The plutocratic elite is using some sort of propaganda, but that wouldn't be the democracy's fault. That would mean the plutocratic elite is making everyone gay. Which is, I guess, possible. Again, it seems very hard that you've got a group of people making everyone gay. I don't see how that works. Well, yeah, but democracy is fake, sure, but then, okay, you think everything's plutocratic. Frank says, you were saying there are definitely deontologists out there, but I guess I am such a virtue ethicist that I don't really believe you. That's fair. A lot of people are it's very hard to find, it's funny, but you realize people think differently than you, but it's just so hard to conceive of when you do certain things so much in your own way. Democracy, MDD says democracy is a means by which the plutocratic elite make us gay and is the most effective means at the plutocrat's disposal. Yes, but how does it make us gay? You're not explaining this. You can say, okay, the plutocrats are making us gay via democracy, but again, you're not explaining that. I don't really know what that. You didn't know this about yourself? Well, we find yourself. I don't know what's going on in this chat. I'm just confused by Newtonia. We're trying to find out why democracy makes us gay. I mean, maybe that's the best outcome then. I'm not saying it ain't. Maybe we should all just be gay plutocrats. Well, why do you want to point kings? Maybe kings make us gay. Or maybe they make us something else. But what do you mean? Well, don't be calling it deviant. We were not saying that anything is deviant. I mean, that's insulting. Maybe something to do with deviancy being more prominent in deviant. Yeah, see, again, I was cool with everything until you called it deviant. We're not saying there's anything wrong with being gay here. We are basically all encompassing friendly here, except for people are being rude. And that's rude. So don't do that. Yeah, now you're going off the deep end, Newtonia. You're gonna have to stop with that stuff. So, not being that gay is deviant. See, nah, dude, you're gonna get yourself a 10-minute timeout for that one. Timeout, Newtonia. 600. Bye bye. 10-minute timeout. Yeah. You can't be coming in here and saying gay people are deviant without explaining yourself. I don't care if democracy makes us gay. Maybe you're right. Maybe you have a point. Maybe you know something about a form of government that I don't. But you overstayed you overblew your point when you said that it was deviant, because why is it deviant? And that's just insulting. So, goodbye. You can come back, but just try to be more careful. I mean, if you're going to be insulting, try to be more careful. I don't care if you have shitty views. Just don't bring it here. And you're allowed to talk, but try to be a bit more, polite about things. I don't mind having people disagree with me, but don't be insulting the people that are here. Okay, let's finish this up. Even if there is such a thing as a duty to love, it seems to sit very awkwardly with both. Oh yeah, we read this stuff. This was like, yeah, this is the whole point. The duties do not help you either way if you love or if you do not love. To do justice to the value of filial love, we need to shift our focus from rightness of actions to virtuousness of character. If we approach filial love in terms of the idea of duty to love, we would end up focusing on what we can do to bring about filial love. I think the discussion of what a child can do to love her parents is a red herring. As mentioned above, whether or not a child loves her parents heavily depends on how her parents have raised them. Again, this is just like, now it's out of the kid's hands again. So the discussion of filial love goes up from what a child can do to bring about what the parents can do to bring about it and deserve it. If the parents are abusive and indifferent, for example, it would be hard for her to love them even if she tries hard. That is, the way her parents raise a child can deeply affect the scope of filial piety that can be controlled by the child herself. Therefore, to cover the ethics of the wide range of the relevant parties, the discussion should focus on the virtuousness of filial love and then spread out to ask what all the relevant agents, which include not just the child herself, but also the parents, educational institutions, the government, etc., can do about it. Okay, so even though Aris is gone at the moment, we just hit the point about how to make the argument against the ontologist stick, which requires individuals having things act upon them. And then we got to Aris's actual point that he was making was, wouldn't it be more important to say things about the groups and the institutions, which is what Aris was actually asking earlier in chat about before, which is the right thing. You have to ask about how this actually plays out over generations and in institutions. And so they got there finally, but they had to do it via this weird way to make the argument against the deontologist. My suggestion has been that lack of filial love deserves negative moral evaluation, not because it signifies a failure to fulfill one's duty, but because it reflects on one's defective character. In my view, a person is less than fully virtuous as a child to the extent that she lacks filial love for her parents. This point can be made independently of whether she is capable of loving her parents or not. Regardless, it is an important part of being filial. I have said that it is inappropriate to blame a child for not loving her parents insofar as it is through no fault of her own. She has done her best to be a filial child, but failed because it was beyond her control, and thus she is not responsible for the lack of filial love. As she does not have the full virtue of filial piety, what she can and ought to do at this moment is to try to love her parents rather than to love her parents. Again, you're going to have to cut people off in the West, but maybe in, Eastern cultures, you always have to try. Maybe that's what, Confucian sort of philosophy says, but in the West, we're just like, nah, screw this sometimes. It's the end of that. But cultural differences. Author says, note that I'm not claiming that there is no such thing as filial duties at all. I admit that there can be various kinds of duties and rights involved in a parent-child relationship. My view is just that, even if filial duties or parental rights exist, they at best serve as fallbacks or constant constraints, as understood in Jeremy Waldron's discussion of the marital relationship. Waldron admits that love and affection are often sufficient enough to generate desired acts between the married partners. However, he says rights and thus correlative duties as spouses are still necessary as fallbacks in cases of relationship collapse. Yeah, so if things collapse, you need to at least have a baseline. For example, suppose that a husband does not love his wife, who has no income enough to pay for her basic living expenses. If he did not have a duty to offer minimal financial support to his wife, and she did not have a right to this support, then she would be vulnerable to poverty caused by her husband's whim. In this sense, the relevant duties and rights to serve to constrain the actions of the spouses to prevent the worst-case scenario in which they not only lack love and affection, but also omit actions minimally required for legal partners. A similar point can be applied to a parent-child relationship. Filial duties and parental rights are no more than fallbacks in the sense that they come into play only when the parents or the child or both lack the desirable emotional and motivational attitudes, for example, love and concern, and thus their intimate relationship collapses. I suspect that the majority of contemporary Western theories of filial piety are focused on filial duties because the main motivation behind them is to discover what adult children owe to their old and infirm parents as the moral basis for legislation and public policies relate to how the adult children ought to treat their parents. Such a duty-centered approach fails to capture the emotional and affective aspects of filial piety, such as love and gratitude, which are a crucial part of an ideal parent-child relationship. It is this kind of inner attitude that distinguishes a parent-child relationship from a mere creditor-debtor relationship or benefactor-beneficiary relationship that gives the former distinctive kind of value. Also, I do not deny that there can be duties somehow related to love. While I denied a duty to love, I have admitted that there may be duties such as a duty to try to love, a duty to act as a loving child would act. There being such duties is not incompatible with my view on filial love. Unlike duty to produce filial love, duty to try to love can be fulfilled even if the agent ends up failing to love insofar as she does her best to love the object in question. This duty can be understood as part of the duty to pursue the moral idea of filial piety as a virtue. In general, part of being virtuous is to have appropriate emotional and motivational states in addition to acting in an appropriate way. These duties would not be subject to the commandability objection, since even a person who does not or even cannot love her parents may still try to love them or act as if she does. This point is also compatible with the intuition that we could not be blamed for failing to love particular people if we had put our utmost efforts to love them. Those duties naturally invite us to a view of filial love as part of virtue. A virtue ethical approach normally suggests what an ideally virtuous person would be like and sets becoming like them as a goal to pursue. If an ideally filial person loves and cares for her parents and acts accordingly, then what the agent ought to do, according to the virtue ethical approach, is to do whatever it takes to get closer to living like them. Conclusion. All right, this is it. Then we can do the review. If you're here in right at the end, we can get our review up and then we'll be done. We can review this. In this paper, I have argued that filial love is morally significant and that its nature and value are better understood as part of the virtue of filial piety rather than as an object of duty. Filial love, along with the others' inner attitudes such as gratitude and respect, would be an example of what are morally valuable but cannot be a proper object of duty. I believe that the normative significance of such inner attitudes can be best understood when they are considered as a constituent of virtue. If I am right, this lends support to the view that important constituents of filial piety are better captured by understanding filial piety as a virtue rather than merely as a source of duty to one's parents. It is morally important to love our parents, but it cannot be a duty. Okay. So, if everyone is now in chat, you are going... Oh, what'd I do? Wrong one. Well, there's the emotes, and then here's the review active. For instance, the first emote there, if you write brain dance, and it's the text on the right, not the title on the left. Brain dance is for fun ideas. And if you think this paper had a lot of fun ideas, got you thinking on stuff, then you can copy the emote if you're on a computer or just type it in. Autocomplete helps a lot on this if you do it. I didn't know if this had a whole lot of fun ideas, but it definitely had big claims that shriveled up. One of the things that happened here was they had to walk back a lot of their claims. They had to, recapitulate the whole deontological point. They're just saying it can't be a duty. Now, the question is, did this paper actually argue more than the commandability objection that they brought up offer? Now, yes, it related the commandability objection against duties in terms of filial piety. So this did say something, but didn't say a whole lot because they had to walk back so much. So Frank gave it a nay and a grapes. I too am going to say grapes. I'm going to give it 2 of them. And, navel gazing only for academics? No, this is for most people. Does this talk about deep ancient mysteries, big ideas? Now, filial piety is an old concept. I'm going to give this an Ouroboros because this actually goes back in to Confucian time. Well, does this deserve it? Did this really talk about anything old, or did this just assume filial piety? No, this just assumed filial piety. It's not even going to get itself an Ouroboros. So I'm going to start off with some grapes. And is there anything else we need to say here? Did this slice and dice its arguments? It did, put one argument forward to show that the argument didn't work. That was the one where, look, if you have the person who doesn't love their parents, they can't be commanded by a duty to love them. And if you have a person who does show filial piety by loving their parents, then the duty is useless. Again, is that the commandability thing? Yeah, that's just the commandability thing. So, yeah, this is just going to get a vote nay. I mean, this is one of these going to get a vote nay and a vote yay. If you are interested in this stuff, this is like kind of going to do this is a vote nay. I need a very mediocre thing. I don't have one yet, but it's going to get a vote yay also. So this is going to get a both ups and down at the same time, because this isn't bad philosophy. In some sense, they made their argument shriveled up a little bit. It wasn't great, but it was just very mid. And so, like, it's okay philosophy. If you're interested in this, go right ahead and read it. But, like, again, not my cup of tea. If anyone else wants to get their votes in, let me know. I mean, the thing was, this one wasn't like, it's interesting. We usually get a lot of grapes with golden turds, but like this one didn't turn out to be shit in the end. It wasn't like very shiny. It wasn't very fancy argument looking, trying to look good, but like it just kind of shriveled up. It didn't make it try itself do something it didn't do. It just didn't do much. It just didn't say a whole lot in the end for different reasons. And it wasn't a whole lot of analytic philosophy either. It wasn't slicing and dicing. There kind of was a little bit, but it wasn't crazy amounts of arguments. I feel like this had a little bit of existential import, like how should we treat each other? But yeah. Well, raisins or grapes? Well, Frank, there's another reason why I did grapes, because the whole thing is kind of looked like a scrotum shriveling up, and no one refers to balls as grapes. I mean, as raisins. They refer to them as grapes sometimes, and so that's why it's grapes. It's the shrivel up, like it kind of pulled itself back. So I was going for the visual joke, also. Yeah, well, it looks like I'm slowing down even. You are free to judge anything you want, MDD. I mean, granted, if you feel bad because you're just taking my word for it at this point, yeah, I guess not. But, like, I'll leave the review screen up for another few seconds. So, if you want to get something in, it is up to you what you want to do. Yeah, so that's the thing. They made their argument. They had to make a lot of concessions along the way, and, that's what it was. But they made their argument, and I suspect people in this tradition, people who are looking at virtue ethics and Confucian virtue ethics, not just Aristotelian-based ones, are going it. Yeah, so if you like the idea, give it a brain dance, and that's fair. Like, but so like if you want to talk about the construction of this argument, they took What is it too big a question? Is what I mean by deontologist? No, it's very easy to answer that. It's actually stupidly easy. The paper's objective seemed fun. It really can't speak to its execution. Yeah, that was the thing. I was just about to talk about structure. It's not a bad idea. You take the commandability objection, you pair it with Confucian virtue ethics, and talk about filial piety. Not a bad idea. It's a good idea for a paper. They had to make a lot of concessions along the way. That's why we're grumpy about it after being here for this long. Too big a question to ask what you mean by a deontologist. Deontologist is someone who basically just follows rule-following systems. Like, and that's what it is. It is it's just a Kantian, you have to, I mean, the thing is, Kant's categorical imperative was you have to consider what it is what rules should everyone in the world follow to make the world be a sort of a moral place. That is literally it. It's just you follow the rules that everyone needs to follow. So no lying, no murdering, like that sort of stuff. But like you have to enumerate all your rules, and that's how you do it. And you don't ask the question, what is the greatest possible good in terms of consequences? Then you're a utilitarian. You ask like, oh, So, like in deontology, you can say, you protect your family. That is something a deontologist can say. You can prioritize your family because you love your mother. And that's a rule. You can prioritize your mother. And everyone can do that. Frank says, but there are many stable sets of rules and you choose from among them. Are you doing so in a virtue way? Well, this is some of the problems with deontology. Maybe you are not doing it in a virtue way, but this is a known problem that you have conflicting rules. In virtue ethics, you have conflicting virtues. Everyone has this problem in their own way. And like a consequentialist has different calculations for what is the final good. And so it's like everyone in the big sort of like moral theories at the moment, they all have their version of this. And if you can't really just default to the virtue ethics one, saying, well, okay, if you have to decide between rules, then you have to do it in a virtue ethics way. Well, how do you decide between virtues? Which one's the most important virtue? Well, maybe you could use a rule then. And so you figure out a solution to this and we can solve the problem. MDD says, do deontologists talk about the attitudes we take, the rules we follow? I don't know, but again, we could go look at the, what was it? This objection here, where was it? And see what someone says. We could look this up. This is, where is it? Yeah, the commandability. We could go look up the commandability objection, and then you could see what people said. I'm sure they have something to say. Like, is there a rule that we ought to take a certain attitude when we follow other deontological rules? I don't know. But, like, again, if you're interested, like, the paper, like, this is the link, and you can go read up on, like, the, like, this section where they talk about, like, the commandability objections between page 5 and 6. It's like, you could look this up because it's right there, and, yeah, you can just look all this stuff up if you're interested, and I'm sure they say stuff about this. Like, they'd have to. Okay, but this is it. Last seconds to get in your review, and then we're going to go find someone to raid. Because my voice is dead.